Number 1.
Before we get into this, I want to start off by saying that this case does not have a lot of reputable sources online, which, as a hobbyist writer, is where I draw 99% of my information from. Lucky for me, and all of you. Michael Whelan of the Unsolved podcast has done the most extensive research I've seen in regards to Leroy Carter Jr., including deep dives into local and contemporary newspapers that detailed the case. Now that we've gotten that disclaimer out of the way, let's explore the strange and frightening unsolved murder of Leroy Carter Jr. Leroy Carter Jr. was born on September 17, 1951 in Louisiana. There is very little information publicly available about his life. According to findagrave.com, Leroy was in the United States Army at some point in his life. He attained the rank of private first class before being discharged. Unfortunately, it seems like Leroy had a hard time after his time in the Army. Again, we don't know a lot about his life, but we do know he was living on the streets in San Francisco, California. He did have a record for petty crimes, but his infractions stem from his situation and the actions he took in an attempt to survive. It was perhaps his homelessness that singled him out as a target and eventually led to his grisly death. On Sunday, February 8, 1981, a concerned young woman called the police to report that she had discovered a backpack splattered with blood in Golden Gate Park. Inside, she found nothing overly ominous, but that blood was enough to prompt her to call. SFPD officer Doherty reported to the park to investigate and at first did not see any sign of any foul play until he came across a sleeping bag. Inside the sleeping bag was most of a body lying in a pool of blood. The only way the body was able to be identified was by fingerprints. Leroy's prints were on file due to his previously discussed criminal record. The most disturbing aspect of the crime scene, however, was the fact that there was no head found with the body. In fact, the park was searched and the head was nowhere to be found. It would seem that whoever was responsible for the murder had taken it with them. Examination of the body showed that the cut was clean and precise, hinting that the killer knew what they were doing. The strangest aspect of the scene is what was found alongside the body. Corn, some articles say individual kernels and some say whole cobs, and a chicken wing were crammed into the gaping wound where the body's head should be. Eventually, the San Francisco Police Department also admitted that there was a mutilated chicken corpse near the body. Thorough searches of the park turned up no further evidence, no weapons, no further traces of blood, no suspects, and no sign of Leroy's missing head. With no apparent leads, a new officer was added to the case, Sandy Gallant, who had recently worked on cases related to Jim Jones and the Jonestown cult. The infamous massacre. Note, many cult members were forced or coerced to ingest the poison or outright were shot, so referring to the incident as a mass suicide is objectively incorrect, had occurred only a few years prior, in November 1978. Gallant's work in relation to the Jonestown case quickly garnered her the reputation of being a cult expert or the cult cop. Gallant noted several similarities between Leroy's case and some subsects of Santeria. According to dictionary.com, Santeria is a pantheistic Afro-Cuban religious cult developed from the beliefs and customs of the Yoruba people and incorporating some elements of the Catholic religion. Tens of thousands of Americans practice Santeria. Some core beliefs involve one god creating the universe and smaller gods overseeing niche aspects of the world. Rituals and sacrifice are often used in the practice of Santeria, but the sacrifices are typically small animals and are rarely human. The subsects of the cult mix classic Santeria with other religious beliefs ranging from ancient Aztec practices to Satanism. In order to try and get the most from this line of investigation, Gallant sought out an expert in Santeria named Charles Wheatley. Wheatley postulated that Leroy had been murdered so his killers, presumably practitioners of Santeria or some similar religious cult, could obtain his head. There are some examples of using human heads to make a sort of potion, boiling it or pulling out the brain, eyes, and slicing off the ears. Consuming the mixture would presumably grant desirable traits linked to magic, but I didn't come across any specifics. In Santeria, according to Wheatley and Gallant, the ritual called for a 21-day period of brewing in a cauldron. After that, the priest would sleep in the same room as the head and the cauldron for 21 more days, ostensibly to connect with them. After this 42-day period, the final step of the ritual would be to return the head to the body's final resting place. Gallant went to her superiors with this theory and the evidence that supported it and was met with unflinching skepticism. Unfortunately, the decision was made to not even have the entire park covered on the 42nd day. The only officers on the scene were Gallant and her partner, who were beginning to doubt the theory as a result of being dismissed. Because they were beginning to second-guess things, maybe their attention slipped. Maybe the killers slipped by them, or noticed a pair and actively avoided them. The point is, Gallant and Wheatley were right. Leroy Carter Jr.'s head was found 42 days after he was murdered, just as they had hypothesized would happen. The killers slipped in and out of the park unnoticed. As of the writing of this blog, they have never been caught. The big theory here is that Leroy was killed in some sort of human sacrificial ritual based on the practice of Santeria. And I have to say, based on what's available, it really seems like that's the case here. The chicken corpse near the body, the wing and corn stuffed in the neck, the 21-day ritual cycle. It all fits. If this were a movie, I'd say Charles Wheatley was the killer or knew more than he was letting on. In reality, he lived literally across the country, and it's extremely unlikely he had anything to do with it. His accuracy on the timeline was just so stunning. The only other theory I can come up with is someone incredibly obsessed and consumed by the idea of Santeria, but not necessarily an authentic practitioner of it. Maybe they were mentally ill, maybe they couldn't find a cult to practice with, maybe they were booted from their cult. There are an endless number of possibilities here. This theory is kind of an offshoot of the first one, in that it's still related to Santeria, but perhaps the murderer ritual sacrifice was not an organized ritual by an actual cult of followers of Santeria, but rather the actions of a single disorganized killer who desperately wanted to practice the religion or wanted the effects of the rituals. I'm not sure where I land here. I think I lean towards this being the actions of a single person, not in the right mind, but maybe that's just because it's a story that's easier to digest for me. What do you all think happened?
Number 2.
Lauren Smith has been missing since November 21, 2011. The 22-year-old woman lived in Leon, Virginia at the time, and she was attending school at Longwood University. She also worked part-time cleaning houses in the area. Additionally, Lauren was well known in the online gaming world. On the day she vanished, Lauren was scheduled to clean a house. Her cousin stated that he dropped her off at the house she was supposed to clean around 2:15 p.m. It is unclear if Lauren actually spent any time at the house, though, as she was spotted driving into a 7-Eleven parking lot and entering the store around 3 p.m. While this was a full 45 minutes after her cousin claimed to have dropped her off, the owner of the house said that he came home to a dirty, unlocked house and he could tell that nobody had let his dogs out. However, the owner of the home did notice that a revolver was missing from his home. Lauren herself never returned home that evening and has never been seen or heard from again. Once she was reported missing, investigators pulled surveillance footage from the 7-Eleven, where Lauren was last seen. The footage shows Lauren parking her car at the store around 3 p.m. She then entered the store and visited with a friend who worked there as an employee. After visiting her friend, Lauren left the 7-Eleven on foot and seemingly vanished. Many found it suspicious that Lauren's car was left at the 7-Eleven. However, according to certain sources, Lauren was planning on buying a new car that day. She was believed to be carrying between $3,000 and $5,000 in cash on the day she vanished. Some have theorized that this is why Lauren left her car at the convenience store, but this has never been confirmed. There are quite a few other possible theories about what might have happened to Lauren as well. The owner of the home that Lauren was supposed to clean was arrested 2 years after her disappearance for stalking and harassing an ex-girlfriend. Additionally, he allegedly used his ex-girlfriend's name and address to post Craigslist ads looking for sexual encounters. The homeowner is currently in prison for those charges, but he is not considered a person of interest in Lauren's disappearance. In fact, investigators do not believe that Lauren actually went to the home that day. They believe that Lauren's cousin is lying about dropping her off there and that the cousin has access to vital information that he is withholding. He also reportedly left the state shortly after being interviewed by police. It is unclear if police have been able to contact him again. Another theory is that Lauren possibly left on her own accord. A suitcase was discovered to be missing from her home, and she had apparently spoken about disappearing to a few friends shortly before she vanished. Lauren's family members do not believe she would voluntarily stay out of touch for this long, especially since she left her passport behind and her cell phone has not been used since she was last seen. Lauren remains missing today. The Madison County Sheriff's Office is investigating her case. If you have any information that could lead to her whereabouts, please contact 540-948-5161.
Number 3.
10 years after Indiana college student Lauren Spierer mysteriously vanished in the early morning hours of June 3, 2011, her family is still hoping for answers. In a Facebook post to mark the tragic anniversary, Spierer's mother, Charlene Spierer, wrote that there has never been a formal suspect in her daughter's disappearance, and what happened that morning remains a mystery a decade later. Shocking that someone so loved could vanish without a trace, but entirely possible, she wrote. It did happen, and 10 years later I still struggle. The space that once held hopes and dreams for Lauren will never heal. It is replaced by an ache fueled by the not knowing. Lauren, who was just 20 years old at the time, disappeared after spending a night out with friends and fellow classmates at the University of Indiana, where she had been studying fashion merchandising, local station WBIW reports. The Scarsdale, New York native was last spotted around 4:15 a.m. by a friend, who told authorities she had been walking barefoot toward her apartment. Witnesses reported the 20-year-old had been highly intoxicated and used drugs that night, according to the local station. There's been hundreds and hundreds of tips or leads on the case, private investigator Michael Ciravolo, president of Bo Dietl & Associates, told Oxygen.com of the investigation to date. We've run them down, and we're satisfied that they weren't valid, but a lot of work goes into vetting these tips to see if there's any valid information connected with them. The 20-year-old did not have her cell phone when she had disappeared and had left her shoes at Kilroy's Sports Bar, where she had been earlier that night. Now, a decade later, Ciravolo believes Lauren's disappearance can likely be explained by one of 3 scenarios. The night she disappeared, she was captured on surveillance footage with a male friend walking toward his apartment complex around 2:51 a.m., the local station reports. According to Ciravolo, that man told investigators that after they arrived at the apartment, Spierer had gone to another male friend's nearby apartment. He claims that she was tipsy, and he offered to let her stay, but she insisted on walking home, which would have been about 4 blocks, and he watched her from his balcony of his townhouse, and when she got to the corner of College and 11th Street, he thinks, if his memory serves him correctly, that he may have seen an individual intersect with her, Ciravolo said. If this account is correct, Ciravolo said one possibility is that Lauren could have encountered an opportunist on the street who took advantage of a very petite girl who had a few too many drinks. Another possibility, according to Ciravolo, could be that someone close to Lauren caused her harm. According to him, not everyone in Lauren's life at the time was able to provide a verifiable alibi, making it possible that someone she knew could have killed her. The third possibility, according to Ciravolo, is that the 20-year-old may have met with an accidental death. She had some heart problems, maybe the drinks that she consumed that night caught up with her, perhaps her heart stopped, he said. She was taking a medication, I'm not sure if she took that medication or not, but perhaps she expired, and they disposed of the body, not wanting to muck up their careers or their lives. In the years since the college student vanished, there's been no shortage of tips in the case, whether from psychics or those claiming they spotted someone who looked like Lauren working in a club. Just last year, Ciravolo said they had someone who bought a home in a county outside of Indianapolis and found a desk with news clippings of Lauren's case. The former homeowner had passed away, but his son was allegedly a pedophile, sparking the suspicion of investigators. After examining the property, investigators found a mound of dirt in the crawl space of the home. Cadaver dogs checked out the mound and hit on the dirt indicating possible remains, but after excavating the area, nothing was unearthed. It's been ups and downs like that, Ciravolo said. We follow tips up until we can't follow them anymore, but we leave no stone unturned, because we never know when that tip, the information from that tip, could turn out to hold the key. In a videotaped statement obtained by Oxygen.com, Bloomington Police Chief Michael Dieckhoff said that since 2011 police have also received nearly 3,600 tips with approximately 1,100 of those being actionable and assigned for additional follow-up. In short, BPD and its various investigative partners have gone wherever Alette has taken us, and that effort will continue, Dieckhoff said. Over the years, Bloomington police have worked with the FBI and other law enforcement partners to scrutinize surveillance footage, conduct extensive land searches and interview hundreds of people in the case that remains still very active, police said in a statement obtained by Oxygen.com. Someone, somewhere, knows something, police said. Anything you might know, even if it seems small, could provide the answers to Lauren's disappearance. As the 10-year anniversary of Lauren's disappearance is marked this week, investigators and Lauren's mother are still hopeful that someone will come forward with credible information to help provide answers for a devastated family. I've learned to manage my days, months and years, but in an instant, something will happen which sends me reeling back to the day it all happened, Charlene wrote. I try my best, I will survive, I will never forget. I do not need a day like today to remember, because every day is a day of remembrance. Anyone with credible information about the case is urged to contact Bloomington Police or Ciravolo at 212-557-3334.
Number 4.
50 years later, the identity of the serial killer who targeted black women is still unknown. In the early 1970s in the Washington, D.C. area of the USA, a killer had begun abducting and murdering girls and young women off the streets. They were all African American, all deemed low risk, and the way in which they were slain suggested a serial offender. After a 17-month reign of terror, the murderer suddenly stopped and, astonishingly, his true identity has never been revealed. Now, the victim's surviving family members have been left wondering if they will ever get answers. Carol Spinks was just 13 when she set out to a grocery store near her home on April 25, 1971. She never returned, and after a frantic search, her body was discovered on an embankment known as I-295 6 days later. Police and the medical examiner concluded she had been dead for 2 to 3 days, and that someone had apparently been feeding her while keeping her hostage for the remainder of the time she had been gone. Carol was missing the blue tennis shoes she had been wearing. On July 8, 16-year-old Darlenia Johnson disappeared after setting off to walk to work. 2 witnesses reported seeing the young girl. One thought she was with her boyfriend, while the other saw her in the company of an older black man in a black car. 11 days later, Darlenia's badly decomposed remains were found within a few feet of the location in which Carol's body had been dumped months earlier. In a shocking revelation, a passerby had already reported having seen what he thought was a body beside the freeway and asked police to look into it several days prior to the discovery. It was later admitted that, although a police patrol had been sent out to investigate, the officer had not got out of his vehicle. He therefore failed to spot the body as he drove by and instead reported it as nothing to see. Darlenia's shoes were also missing when she was eventually discovered. Mere weeks later, on July 27, 10-year-old Brenda Faye Crockett vanished on her way to buy pet food at a local grocery store. While her family looked for her an hour later, her little sister received a phone call from little Brenda saying she had been kidnapped by a white man and was going to get a cab home. Shortly afterwards, Brenda spoke to her mother's boyfriend in a second phone call in which she said she was in Virginia and asked had her mother seen her. Brenda was asked for more information, but she was cut off after heavy footsteps approached on the other end of the line. Hours after she went missing, Brenda's body was found by a hitchhiker on Route 50 in Cheverly. Although she had been barefoot at the time of her disappearance, her feet had been washed clean. There were also traces of green fibers on her body. Despite the reference to Virginia in the phone call, police felt Brenda had not been missing long enough to be this far away and had probably still been in the vicinity of her home. They also suggested the killer may even have known Brenda's mother and might have been concerned she had seen him with her daughter as he abducted her, hence the question to ascertain whether or not he had been witnessed. It was October 1 before the murderer struck again, this time taking 12-year-old Nenamashia Yates as she walked to a store and killing her a few hours later. The child's body was found in Prince George County, Maryland, and more green fibers were removed from the scene. Next, 18-year-old Brenda Woodard was abducted on November 15 after having dinner with a friend and taking the bus home. Her body was found near Route 202 a day later, after she had been sexually assaulted, strangled and stabbed. By now, the media had linked the series of killings and dubbed their perpetrator the Freeway Phantom in newspaper reports. This seemed to appeal to the killer, who placed a note in the pocket of Brenda Woodard before he dumped her body. Chillingly, it was written in her own handwriting in a page from one of her school notebooks, with the teenager clearly having been made to pen the note under duress. It read, "This is tantamount to my insensitivity sick to people, especially women. I will admit the others when you catch me if you can. Freeway Phantom." It was another 10 months before 17-year-old Diane Williams went missing in September 1972. She had been out with her boyfriend, and he had walked her to the bus stop before she vanished. Her body was found hours later by a trucker along I-295, although her shoes were found with her in this case. This is when the killing spree seemed to stop. However, when the FBI reopened the case in 1987, investigators also tentatively linked the murder of 18-year-old Tira Ann Bryant to the Freeway Phantom. The teenager hailed from Maryland and her body was found in Nebraska in November 1972, but the circumstances seemed to fit the MO of the serial killer. As the bodies started to come in thick and fast, investigators tried to use the then limited tools at their disposal to find out who the Phantom could be. This is probably one of the most massive and extensive investigations that was ever conducted in D.C., retired D.C. homicide detective involved in the case Romaine Jenkins told the Washington Post. And these were probably the first serial cases in the District of Columbia. The FBI called upon the relatively new phenomenon of criminal profiling to drive new leads in the case, with former agent Walter McLaughlin coming to the conclusion that the Freeway Phantom was likely to be a black male who was familiar with the streets on which he hunted. He also suggested the Unsolved was potentially choosing his victims based on a perceived link to a woman in his life, or from his past, such as a girlfriend, wife or mother. Investigators looked in detail at the note left with Brenda Woodard's body too, and said they thought the killer could be of above-average intelligence. Although they quizzed English teachers in the area about students using the unusual word tantamount, this ultimately came to nothing. Among the possible jobs the Phantom might be doing were listed delivery man, postal worker, military man and medical assistant, while any arrest records would be likely to include vice, solicitation and assault, the FBI posited. In 2005, the Freeway Phantom case was well and truly cold when D. Kim Rosmo from Texas State University was called upon by Detective James Trainum of the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police to carry out a geographic profile. As true crime author Blaine L. Pardo details, the Freeway Phantom only operated in quite a small area in Washington, D.C., and just inside Maryland, and he paid particular attention to their roads. When Rosmo created an anchor point for all the significant locations in the case, it pointed to St. Elizabeth's Hospital, also known as the mental hospital, where the government sent some of their worst criminals. Indeed, 2 of the Phantom's victims were dumped on I-295 just 20 feet from the perimeter fence of Street Es, leading some to believe a former patient could once have scoped it out as a possible site. What was more, one of the suspects linked to the original investigation also had strong ties to the former hospital. Robert Elwood Askins was just 19 in 1938 when he served cyanide-laced whiskey to 5 prostitutes at a brothel in Washington, D.C., resulting in the death of Ruth McDonald. 2 days later, he stabbed and killed another prostitute and was arrested. He told police he was a woman hater and was taking his revenge for contracting a venereal disease from a sex worker earlier that year. Askins was convicted, found criminally insane, and committed to St. Elizabeth's. However, he stayed only 13 years before he was released as a social recovery in 1952. In 1977, when Askins was a 58-year-old computer technician, he was arrested for abducting and raping a 24-year-old woman, and police subsequently searched his home in connection with the Freeway Phantom killings. Nestled in a drawer were court documents containing verdicts from a judge in a case involving Askins. Within the documents was the word tantamount, and when his colleagues were quizzed, they said it was a word he also frequently used. However, in yet another jaw-dropping twist, police could not find enough physical evidence to connect Askins to the Freeway Phantom crimes. He died at the Federal Correctional Institution in Maryland at the age of 91, having never been officially linked to them. Nevertheless, one of the original detectives investigating the murders continued to suspect Askins during his incarceration for other crimes, and he eventually directly asked him about his involvement. According to the Washington Post, Askins replied that he did not have the depravity of mind required to commit any of the crimes. Although Askins is the strongest potential suspect in the Freeway Phantom case, as a misogynist with a history of murder, the FBI has also pointed out that the culprit may also have been a doctor, relative or worker with connections to Street Es. The National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crime once suggested that more time should be dedicated to why the killing of victims that fit a particular profile suddenly stopped, adding, "The offender has either died, been incarcerated in an institution of some kind, or has moved from the area. If the offender has moved, it is likely that the new jurisdiction has experienced similar murders of similar victims." Retired homicide detective James Trainum has said he still believes the killer lived in the same neighborhood as the first two victims, in Congress Heights just south of St. Elizabeth's Hospital. "He felt safe there, he felt he could do his dirt and get away with it," he commented. In yet another blow for this case, the Metropolitan Police Department of the District of Columbia has admitted many of the Freeway Phantom case files are now incomplete. Some were kept by individual detectives who eventually retired or died, while others were simply lost. However, in 2002, Trainum did submit a semen sample found on Diane Williams' clothing to Maryland State Police for forensic testing. It is unclear what has happened regarding this line of inquiry since, and whether it may yet yield results. Blaine Pardo told CBS affiliate WUSA 9 he also feels someone will one day come across the Phantom's trophies, which has the potential to lead back to the killer's identity through family members. Ultimately, many of the victims' relatives have come to the heartbreaking conclusion that the case was never solved or even looked into with sufficient determination because of the color of their skin. Evander Spinks, the sister of Carol Spinks, told The Washington Post in 2006, "You better bet that, if these had been white girls, the police would have solved the cases. They didn't care about us. All the cases involving white girls still get publicity. But ours have been forgotten." Even retired MPDC veteran Tommy Musgrove said in the same article, "If those girls had been white, they would have put more manpower on it, there's no doubt about that." Patricia Williams, whose sister Diane was the last known victim of the Freeway Phantom, recently told People magazine how she had a distinguished career in the police and always hoped she might see the murders finally solved. "I will not be surprised that I will die not knowing who killed my sister. But I'm never going to stop praying that I do," she said. Her mother Margaret added, "I know she's resting in peace, and it doesn't matter to her anymore. But I would like to know who did it, and why. That's the big question, why?" The Freeway Phantom remains an open cold case with the MPDC Homicide Division, and anyone with information is asked to contact authorities in Washington, D.C. or the FBI.
Number 5.
It was a dark day on May 4, 2001, when Bonny Lee Bakley was brutally shot in the head. Married to Robert Blake, Bonny made her way to dinner at Vitello's restaurant on Tujunga Avenue in Studio City when the incident took place. She was sitting in her car, parked on a side street around the corner from the restaurant. The shocking incident shook America and there were murmurs that Blake was somehow involved. During the investigations, Blake claimed that he had returned to the restaurant to collect a gun that he had left there. Although he claimed he wasn't present there when the shooting took place, the scenario sounded fishy, and in 2002, Blake was charged with Bakley's murder, solicitation of murder, conspiracy and the special circumstance of lying in wait. Much later, it was proved that the gun Blake left in the restaurant was not used to fire shots. The mystery still boggles many minds. A Hollywood murder straight out of a movie plot, isn't it? In a trial that captivated the nation, many still wonder what happened back then, and did Robert Blake really kill his wife? Born as Michael James Gubitosi and raised in Nutley, New Jersey, Blake is an Emmy-winning actor best known as the star of the 70s cop drama Beretta. As a child actor, he began his career with a lead role in the final years of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer's Our Gang, Little Rascals, short film series from 1939 to 1944, and gained prominence for the murder mystery of his wife's death. On April 18, 2002, Blake was arrested and charged with Bakley's murder along with his longtime bodyguard, Earl Caldwell, who was charged with conspiracy in connection with the murder. His lawyer Gerald Schwartzbach asked, "Within hours of the murder, the detectives expressed the opinion in your presence that Mr. Blake had killed Miss Bakley?" "Yes, that he was a key suspect. But to me, that just seems to be standard detective reaction, that when a woman is murdered, her husband is usually a suspect," author Miles Corwin remarked, who described a 2004 book about the murder investigation as homicide special. Cutting a sorry figure for Blake, the criminal trial began with the defense team portrayed the aging actor as innocent. Taking into account that it was Bonny's 10th marriage and Blake's second marriage, the team alleged that she trapped the actor using her pattern of sending letters and nude photos of herself to famous men. Right at the beginning of their marriage, the pair were blessed with a daughter, Rose, who was born in June 2000. Shockingly, claims said that the child's real father was Christian Brando, son of the celebrated actor Marlon Brando. A paternity test quashed those claims and proved the baby was Blake's. That November, Blake and Bakley exchanged vows, and after her death, Blake was arrested for the murder. During the trial, two former stunt doubles, Ronald Duffy Hambleton and Gary McLarty, claimed the actor had recruited them to kill his wife. However, the two were found to be cocaine users and drug addicts, and their statements were classified as unbelievable. 8 months later, in November 2005, Blake was found guilty in a civil trial of intentionally causing Bonny Lee Bakley's death and was ordered to pay $30 million to Bakley's children. Rose remained in the care of Blake's eldest daughter, Delina. The public opinion was mixed after the verdict, with many claiming Blake was guilty and others not convinced about the charges as there wasn't enough evidence. On social media too, the debate still continues. Robert Blake was victimized by that disgusting excuse for a human being. "I believed he was innocent then and still do without a doubt. Makes me angry when I see what some people will do for that almighty buck. Hope she is burning in hell," one tweet said, and another read, "They had an expose on Robert Blake, apparently he was not guilty, and it is a shame the way he was treated. My heart is sad for him. When someone is innocent, it is not right to keep condemning them, sad. Apparently, you don't respect our legal system in America. Forget the name, Robert Blake. You weren't there, I don't think Oj was there, and a jury found him not guilty. How would you feel if you were wrongfully accused, tried in media before your court trial, found innocent and still condemned?" One tweet read, "Watched 2020's last night. Robert Blake was victimized by that disgusting excuse for a human being. I believed he was innocent then and still do without a doubt. Makes me angry when I see what some people will do for that almighty buck. Hope she is burning in hell." The murder of Bonny Bakley is unsolved and may never be solved because the list of suspects is in her little black book. Family, friends and people she scammed are all suspect. Who killed Bonny Bakley? There is one person that knows what happened that night. The killer that stopped Bonny from destroying any more lives. Someday, someone may need to confess their crime, but until then, it looks like Bonny Bakley's murder will be unsolved.
Number 6.
In 2011, 17-year-old Marble Arvidson stepped out of his house, never to be seen again. Now, his family and the Brattleboro Police Department hope that renewed attention to the case will bring closure to the decade-long mystery. Almost 10 years ago, Marble Ace Arvidson, 17, left a note on his bedroom door saying he'd return in approximately 30 minutes. No one has seen him since. At least, no one who has shared information with Marble's family or the Brattleboro Police Department. "We won't stop looking," said Trish Kittredge, Marble's aunt. Detectives with the Brattleboro Police Department are reviewing Marble's case with fresh eyes and requesting anew that the community share any information, even if it seems insignificant. Detective Lieutenant Jeremy Evans said that an absolute lack of strong leads makes Marble's case unique. According to Evans, in most missing persons cases, detectives have at least some leads. Not so with Marble. Just boom, and he was gone, he said. The biggest priority is finding Marble. Nobody knows what happened after Marble Arvidson left his foster home at 503 Marlborough Road, Route 9, on August 27, 2011 with a man who had come to the door of the Red House next to the Chelsea Royal Diner. Evans confirmed that the man remains unidentified. According to a roommate, Marble greeted the man at the door, a person whom he seemed friendly with. Shortly after that, Marble wrote his note, posted it to his door, and left. Marble's family and those working his case all hope that with a decade's worth of distance, people's lives may have changed enough that they now feel comfortable coming forward, even if that wasn't the case at the time of his disappearance, Evans said. He said that people don't come forward during an investigation for hundreds of reasons. His mother, Sigrid Arvidson, said that in 2011, detectives didn't have enough information to narrow down a location to start looking for her son. In 2011, searches were organized, but she knows areas were surely missed. Our position as a family is that the biggest priority is finding Marble, she said. It would be a very slim reason to me that anything is placed in front of that. So justice is very much a distant second from finding Marble. Kittredge and Arvidson said that no one should assume that the police have all the facts. If they haven't physically spoken to the police before or since, they should not assume that the information that they personally have is already known by the police, Kittredge said. So if they think, hey, I have this thought, and it's been running around in my head for 10 years, but I'm just sure it's nothing, call the police. It's all of those little pieces that can be brought together that might bring a picture into focus, she noted. Kittredge would most like to speak to the man who came to the door. I feel like, if we could talk to that person, it would begin to figure out where he went on that day, she said. According to the Federal National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, NamUs, Marble's hair was strawberry blonde and shoulder length. He has blue eyes. He also has several scars on his arms. Marble, at 6 feet tall and 165 pounds, was last seen wearing a black fedora hat, a black button-down shirt, and black pants. His family and police assume he was wearing shoes, but though the NamUs listing says he was wearing black hiking boots, they can't be sure. Marble was a student at Brattleboro Union High School, looking forward to beginning his senior year. According to reports in multiple news articles at the time, he was dating and making plans for life after high school. On the afternoon of August 27, a roommate said they heard Marble answer the door. After a friendly exchange with the unknown male, Marble stuck a note on his bedroom door saying he was with the Gremlin Horde, his friends at a party, and that he would be back soon. He then left with the person to an unknown destination and unknown means of travel, according to a profile of the case from Vermont State Police. Marble left the house right before it started raining, and then was away that night, and didn't return for what everybody assumed was his plan, to get together with his then-girlfriend, Kittredge said. And when he didn't return, and it was assumed maybe he stayed somewhere else. And soon thereafter, the rain started falling as Tropical Storm Irene came careening up the east coast and into Vermont. Despite, and amid, the chaos caused by the winds and rain, which washed out roads and flooded homes across Windham County and the state, several searches were conducted. According to the VSP, several unconfirmed sightings of Marble have been reported, the last of which was in Brattleboro in April 2012. But beyond those fleeting tips, no substantial leads have surfaced. Detectives are starting from scratch in an effort to find new information or leads. The team reviewing the case is completely new, and sometimes fresh eyes can yield fresh insights, Evans said. As a parent, I can't imagine this, he said. Marble's disappearance wasn't acknowledged until the next day, and, by then, the whole community was in crisis because of the storm, a situation that Kittredge, who organized the ground search for her nephew in 2011, said overshadowed those efforts. It is difficult for the community of people who knew him to look back at the days that followed and recall at how so much more attention went to the natural disaster. It wasn't really acknowledged until the next day that he was truly missing, Kittredge said. By then, the river had breached at that point, and roads were being washed out, power lines were down, and the whole community was in crisis, not just this family. Kittredge said she still feels appreciation for the hundreds of people who searched for Marble and distributed flyers. Weekend after weekend and day after day, we had families and parents with their kids, and all kinds of people coming in from out of town to help us search for Marble, Kittredge said. We would, 1, want to thank them for that, and 2, want to remind them to go back and think about that time, and then maybe look at it from a new light. Kittredge retired in 2016 after 25 years in the Army. She is now the director of operations for a youth sports camp in Pennsylvania during the summers. Arvidson now lives in New Mexico and said that she has heard rumors that Marble left the house wearing hiking boots. She's not sure that's accurate. She does believe, however, that he didn't expect any trouble. Kittredge's organizational efforts made the physical search for Marble possible, Arvidson said. Everyone who showed up at the search headquarters located in the parking lot of the Chelsea Royal was assigned to groups and received a map, a whistle, and a camera. They were briefed on search procedure, she said. Community searchers would walk river banks and trails, and a canine search also got off the ground, she added. God bless everybody, Arvidson said. She added that most of the searchers were adults, and adults are often not privy to the kid world. As a result, she urges anyone who was a part of Marble's social network to share information they have either from August 27, 2011 or from the weeks leading up to it. In 2021, most hear the name Marble Arvidson and immediately conjure a missing 17-year-old. Yet, according to his aunt and mother, Marble was a complex young man who was creative and empathetic, and who carried his own struggles some days with more grace than others. Arvidson remembers Marble as a presence in Brattleboro. She described him as playful, a creative thinker, an incredible storyteller with a deep capacity for empathy, and the profound ability to recognize another's struggle and know how to cheer them up. She recalled how her son would interact with strangers who looked like they needed a lift. Marble had a flamboyant streak and fostered his own style, she said. She remembers that he used to carry a baby spoon in his coat pocket just because he thought the tiny utensil was cool. He understood suffering, and he understood that laughing helps, Arvidson said. Kittredge smiled while she listened to her sister's recollections. According to his NamUs profile, Marble left the house that afternoon wearing a black fedora. Marble always wore the distinctive hat from Guatemala, Kittredge said. He always wanted to make a statement. She described him as goofy, as jovial, and as someone who could connect with anyone, recognizing what it would take in that moment to make a person feel better. So he was somebody who wasn't afraid to embrace the day or embrace life, Kittredge said. Even though on many levels, he struggled figuring out where that was going for him, and where maybe he felt comfortable or not in those struggles. Arvidson said that sometimes Marble's kindness and his struggles led him into unknown situations, acknowledging that there are people in this world who would want to take advantage of helpful and empathetic people like him. She acknowledged that some of her own struggles were why he was receiving help out of the home and living with a foster family. But her son's status as a foster kid and his disappearance during a catastrophic flood both bother Arvidson, who feels that people have made too many assumptions. It has never sat well that people described as unfortunate the fact that Marble disappeared so close to Tropical Storm Irene. Arvidson that she's still angry that at the time, the flooding and recovery efforts received more press than Marble's disappearance. She also believes that if Marble had been a blonde, blue-eyed girl, people would have worked harder to solve the mystery. She said people probably still react to Marble's story with bias. There's been a lot of assumptions made that have not helped the situation or the investigation at all, Arvidson said. Marble Arvidson would now be 26 years old. Talking about his disappearance was difficult enough for Kittredge and Arvidson, but talking about where he could be now is heart-wrenching for them. Both stifle tears when mentioning the scenario that he might still be alive and unable to return to them. "We don't believe he left willingly," Kittredge said. "And I don't like to imagine the scenario that would allow him to still be alive and held against his will out there and not have come back to us." She added a direct message to Marble with a fierceness in her voice. "If you read this, know that we love you and that we're looking for you." There are still some who believe that Marble left of his own free will, that his complicated relationship with family left scars both physically and emotionally. One of Marble's high school friends offered the Commons this theory, characterizing him as scary smart when it came to personal relationships. Marble had the intelligence to run and not get caught, his friend said, adding that he knew how to get what resources he needed from various people. If Marble Arvidson is alive and happy and left his old life behind a decade ago voluntarily, his mom says she would be happy for him regardless. "I mean, if you've got something cool going on, high five, man," Arvidson said. She suggested that he could potentially turn himself in and receive the reward, now $10,000, that has been raised for information leading to his location. "You can get the F-ing reward money for finding yourself, man," Arvidson said. "How cool would that be?" "That might sound ridiculous," Arvidson conceded. But she said that whatever the situation, she just wants Marble to know he's as loved, no matter what. Arvidson said that in August, if the pandemic situation allows and Marble's whereabouts remain unknown, the family plans to hold a memorial for Marble. They still hope that won't be the case as they push boldly for progress on Marble's disappearance. Arvidson begged, "From the bottom of my heart, for anyone with information to come forward without fear of being presumed guilty in any way. I'm his mom. I want to find my boy and miss him. I love him," she said. "He deserves to be found."
Number 7.
Stories like this about Lutricia Ann Smith Thompson is a classic example of why I decided to launch Our Black Girls. For decades, no one has known what happened to the Pascagoula, Mississippi resident and 19-year-old mother, and it's stated by the National Missing and Unidentified Person System that at the time of her disappearance back in 1988, there wasn't even an investigation into her case. She was a teen who had just given birth, but authorities refused to take her missing person case seriously. Now, here we are, with no real leads, little information, and a family that never learned what happened to their relative. In 1982, a man named Samuel Little was arrested in Pascagoula for the murder of Melinda Rose Lapre. According to reports, the 22-year-old had vanished in the fall, however, he wasn't indicted for her murder. Little would then be charged for a series of other murders of women in various states including California, Florida, and Ohio. He's been accused of murder in Florida, but he was acquitted during trial after the characters of witnesses were brought into question. In 1984, a young woman he'd beaten and strangled survived her attack. Just 1 month later, He was found at the same location with a woman he'd also attacked and strangled. He was sentenced to serve only a little over 2 years for both crimes. Things unfolded for Little and his victims when, in 2012, he was taken into custody at a homeless shelter over a narcotics charge. After running his DNA through the system, authorities found that he was linked to a number of murders from the 1980s, all in Los Angeles. Since that time, authorities have investigated close to 100 cases that Little could have possibly been involved in throughout the United States. Little is currently serving out 4 life sentences in Georgia without the possibility of parole. Whether or not Samuel Little is being investigated in connection with Lutricia's disappearance is undisclosed, along with many other potential cases. While Samuel Little was under investigation, the family of Lutricia Ann Smith Thompson contacted investigators to ask them if their daughter's sister could have been a victim of the vicious serial killer. They last had contact with Lutricia on September 1, 1988, and never heard from her again. Reports state that Lutricia told them she was leaving to meet up with a few friends, but she never came back. Whether or not she made her appointment with her friends is unknown. Additionally, Lutricia Ann Smith Thompson has just given birth weeks earlier on August 11. When her family attempted to report her missing with the Pascagoula police, there was reportedly no investigation into her case. At the time of her disappearance, Lutricia Ann Smith Thompson stood 5 feet 4 inches tall and 135 to 150 pounds. She had dark brown hair and brown eyes. She has scars on her left hand. Lutricia was last seen wearing an orange shirt with navy blue pants. She would be 50 years old at the time of this publication. Anyone with information regarding this case is urged to contact the Pascagoula Police Department at 228-938-6654 or their local authorities. Please share this story about Lutricia Ann Smith Thompson to help gain awareness about her missing person case. She is our sister and her life matters.